Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Director Mulvaney. Welcome back. I do want to applaud you for creating a more real budget. It seems that every year we have these fake budgets that balance in 10 years. It doesn't matter who the administration is or what side of the aisle they're on. We have these fictitious budgets that create imaginary things that are never going to occur, and you didn't do that. So I want to thank you for that. I know that you and I are of the same ilk. We care deeply about the deficits that our nation has. I know you were a strong proponent of balanced budgets when you were in the House, and now you're in this position. And we as a nation, as you know, are on an unsustainable path. And I don't want to get into specifics right now, and I think we all understand where we are as a nation. And you know, I was somewhat discouraged that the cap deal that was reached last week was really far above what even the President had asked for. So I think we have to say that Congress, in this particular case, went way beyond what the President was even requesting. As strong of a military supporter as he is, and I am, Congress went way beyond that, both on military spending and on non-military spending. So you've had to actually jack your budget up. So as people are giving you a hard time today about deficits, you actually requested less money, and at the last moment had to elevate everything to take into account what Congress on its own accord did to create even bigger deficits. And so what I'd like to ask you is, just philosophically, where do we go? I mean, by 2028, we're going to be at 91% debt to GDP. I know that our military leaders would tell us that our deficits are the greatest threat to our nation, not Russia, not ISIS, not the many things that we're dealing with in the Middle East and around the world, but our debt. I know that you care about that. So just philosophically, tell me where we go from here.
Well, I think the budget gives some insight into that, Senator. Keep in mind, even though it doesn't balance within the 10-year window, this budget still represents a $3 trillion reduction in spending over the course of the 10-year window. That's the second largest reduction in proposed spending of any budget ever. The only one that's larger was the budget that we introduced last year. In fact, but for the caps deal, it probably would have been larger this year. That's a $1.7 trillion reduction of that $3 in mandatory spending. We, to Senator Sanders' point, I would contend to you that we absolutely keep our promises. We do not take a look at or make any reforms to Social Security retirement. We do not take a look at or make any reforms to Medicare recipients, services that they get, but there are other monies that can be saved. We saved $1.7 trillion in mandatory spending here by doing it, looking at things like the way drugs are priced within Medicare. We do some tremendous, I think, new ideas on things like food stamps and the Farm Bill, other mandatory spending. There are some good ideas out there in this budget that the legislature could take up to get real long-term savings and that could make a dent in that GDP ratio. In fact, I think you see by the end of our budget, even though we don't balance, we're getting very close, and we do bend the curve down in terms of a GDP, debt per GDP. I think we're down below 1.5% debt to GDP by the end of this window. So that's a tremendous move in the right direction.
And so over the longer term, I think most of us realize that with baby boomer generation, this is going to go on for some time. Over the longer term, based on the way you see Congress acting and you see the other pressures that we have to invest in things like infrastructure, you're actually more hopeful, because it doesn't feel that way to me, that we're heading in a hopeful direction as it relates to solving our nation's deficits.
I consider myself to be an optimist. With no disrespect to my Democrat friends, I think one of the reasons I'm a Republican is that I'm an optimist. I will tell you, though, that there was a very interesting dynamic in going through the plussing up of the budgets. It's a lot more fun to spend money than it is to reduce. It's a lot harder to reduce spending in the long term than it is to spend. And I think that it's incumbent upon all of us to start making difficult decisions, to decide together as a legislature, as an administration, are these deficits that we're really willing to tolerate? We aren't as an administration, which is why we have a budget that bends that curve down in the appropriate direction, and we hope that the legislature takes us up on some of the ideas that we offer this year.
One last question. My time is expiring. There's a huge plus up in several areas. I mean, that take some of the agencies that are plussed up per this last cap deal, including the Pentagon, which, you know, I support making sure that our military has what it needs. But the plus up is so large that you could have a situation where people are just rushing to get contracts out the door to take advantage of the monies that are available that year. What are y'all doing to ensure that we don't end up doing multiple wasteful things in light of these massive plus-ups in 1 year?
I'll give you one example. I think one thing the administration is extraordinarily proud of, in addition to increasing the spending in the Defense Department, for the first time ever, as of September, the DoD now tells us they are ready to be audited. We are starting that process. In fact, we've already seen the first fruits of that. You saw a report last week about the Pentagon's inability to track about $800 million. That's a good thing, because that was something that we've been able to expose, and now we'll be able to fix. So we absolutely take that risk seriously and hope to be able to do better with it now that we've made some improvements.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.